Okay, so we did talk earlier that we want to cover a little bit about wilderness today, because I am writing a piece on it. But before I do that, I just want to talk about something related because I've been obsessed with the Zoran Mandani election in New York City.
Right.
I mean, partly because I used to live there, and I get the issues and stuff like that. and and it was really such an exciting campaign and race because he was okay. Now it says my internet's unstable. Okay, um, but anyway, he was considered a real outsider and ran this real insurgent campaign, and he's won. Which fascinates me because I think to do the things that we do, we actually need change. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm always fascinated by situations which actually uh, require change, either a change in thinking or a change in uptake by the general public, or so on and so forth. So I actually have been watching all his videos, listening to all his spiels, and I've been looking on his website. And interestingly enough, there he does have one. I was curious whether he did anything about climate, you know, um, and his one big climate idea, which he didn't really talk about because he was really focused on the freezing the rent and the free buses and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So he didn't really talk about this, but I think it's quite brilliant also because I've actually been involved in trying to get this done. And his climate initiative is something called Green Schools for a Healthier New York City,
Nice.
which is really interesting because I was following a very similar logic. Schools represent wasted space and opportunity a lot of the times. They sit on land, a fairly large piece of land. They waste resources. A lot of the times they're actually paying people to cut the grass over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's not planted in a way that actually helps them. Uh, it's all very bare. And So I've had two interactions with schools, which ended up in failure. Uh, One of them was actually with. So what happens with these situations is, also a really sort of progressive, smart teacher will reach out. Who's heard about me? It's like, what do you think you can do for us? And I'll go in, and then I find that okay. So my first one was with a convent, and they really wanted to. They wanted to have an edible garden. Of course they did, which, but this was quite early on in the thing. And I was not completely negative about putting in an edible garden. But when I went to look at the space, they wanted to grow it in between. A lot of school buildings are just two long rows.
Yeah.
And then there's this wasted space in the middle. So they wanted it there. And there's no sun.
Because it's shaded by the blocks.
It's shaded by the block, A. B, the soil is utter crap because that's where they put all the rubble when they're building the school, probably.
Yeah.
It's a little, and so the amount of work it would take to make it an actual edible space would have been
Yeah.
crazy. And then it wouldn't have been an edible space. It would just be in a space with pests and whitefly because the plants are just not thriving, you know. So the first thing I tried to work do them is like, this it just cannot work. Uh, and I went and suggested some other space, and I thought this was quite interesting because the schools actually have a lot of land, right? So I suggested some other spaces and suggested some other things besides just a vegetable garden. I'm like, have a garden,
Yeah.
and then maybe you can have watercolor still like you can have watercolor classes out there. It's an outdoor classroom. And I could not push that idea through because, and this is quite interesting, uh, the the value they attach to land is quite fixed.
Yeah.
Anything they perceive as competing with school sports land
Yeah.
is not not viable.
Yeah.
So
Sports
wherever
takes
I wanted to put
highest
it, they were
priority.
like, "Oh, that's where our sports thing is," even though it's like quite a way away from it. It's not. It would just like taking a maybe a little egg, you know. So
Right,
that's
right,
one problem. Then the other problem was because I wanted it to be a holistic classroom, so we'd put in the compost seed, and then we would have and then they would have teachers come on board and they say, "Oh, compost seeds are stinky."
right.
And no amount of convincing could say, not if you don't put.
They were really just stuck in a paradigm, and
It's
it's hard.
actually in a paradigm with no actual knowledge. They don't
Yeah,
know anything about composting.
yeah, and it's really hard when there's no gardener amongst them. When there's no individual who enjoys gardening,
Yeah,
who can have how to say a demonstration of their home garden being a nice garden that they tend every day or every week. There is no one to give testimony to what's possible to be done. What's
yeah,
how much effort does it take? Yeah. What are the shortcuts or the tips that you can use?
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's something I observed when we do school edible gardens, and we used to do
yeah,
them as a project.
yeah.
But we let the students design and the. But then it also falls back into this pattern that they are planting only things that they see as economically valuable.
Or easy
Doesn't
to grow,
necessarily,
which doesn't make sense.
yeah,
It doesn't make sense to grow kangkong. It's so cheap. It's like,
yeah.
it's defeating, Okay,
Yeah, but then
anyway,
when they
so
grow things like chilies, then they go into this hyper mode of fertigation and drip irrigation, liquid fertilizer. Then it goes extreme. There's no in between doing it for the
yeah,
aesthetics of it. Like it will be interesting to teach kids bud grafting because they have beautiful flowering trees. Like the kenanga and all these kind of things. So those jasmine type family trees. Like if
mm,
you bud grafted it, then they could sell the cutting to people to raise funds. Instead of growing vegetables to raise funds, they could bud graft
yeah,
uh
yeah.
good flowering
Not that
trees.
they even need to raise. Why do they need to raise funds? It's an
They
outdoor
want to
classroom.
teach no, they want to teach kids entrepreneurship. And these are
Why?
like
Why?
whatever the
Why?
model is, yeah, I don't know. But that's
Okay.
what I
So
realized
anyway,
the conundrum
it
tends
it
to.
di- it, it didn't work out. So what happened was uh, that the teacher that I was interacting with was actually quite smart, and she kind of got what I was trying to do. But these things go into committee meetings, and in the committee meetings, the other teachers started to have a point of view, and it didn't work out. So it didn't work out. Years later, I got another reach out. Interestingly enough, it was another teacher from that group from the convent that moved to this
Right.
other school, and she reached out to me. By this time, I had become quite. I had
Aware of
become. Well, no, I just become quite. No, I'm not. I'm not. I don't want to go to edible garden. Yeah, absolutely not. Unless it's the only. Oh, I think there were three projects. One I agreed to grow the edible garden because it was actually a low income school. It was a Tamil school, and
right.
I thought, if we do put an edible garden, the parents would become involved. You know, and it would actually make sense. It would actually literally put food on their table. But when you do it in a rich urban school, it, it has no value to them.
Yeah.
So anyway, so this other school is actually, I won't name the school, but it's near here. And it was a classic. And I'd already been thinking about this because I've been working at other schools and all these schools. And I thought this is such a great opportunity. These two building strips and then this wasted piece of land in the middle. Okay.
Huh.
So when I went there to the school, I discovered that they actually had a really incredible wildlife sort of. They were really they had like all these display of insects and butterflies. They were really into it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to push for this. I'm like, how about if we grow a small forest in between
Yeah.
these two buildings? You know? So then we start to, I'm able to introduce Malaysian landscape elements, you know, That means we will start to put in things that we can teach them to recognize flowering trees,
Mm.
fruiting trees, and stuff like that.
Mm.
A. B. I then wanted to incorporate these newer values of um, forest thinking, which meant they would be green spaces. So they would actually afford shade for the buildings, you know, they would actually start to work, you know, they would
Mm.
actually be places that the students could go to read. Uh, and maybe, it's a reality now that they're using their phone. So maybe we actually cultivate a connection with the phone and nature where, they are, uh, we do an Instagram page or something like that, you know. So it started out really well. They were starting to get into it. I got a plan. And then one of the teachers wanted to grow a edible herb garden. And even though I
Trees
managed to
haven't
get,
had time to grow,
uh,
and the trees haven't had time to grow.
uh, but this is what happens, and this is why I've stopped working with schools because actually the personalities involved can be quite disruptive. So
Yeah.
this one teacher was able to actually get everyone else disinterested in my idea and go with her idea, you know? And that's what they did. So we couldn't do it. So we couldn't do this really progressive thing, which is exactly what Zoran Mandani wants to do in schools, right? So he's saying that schools um, should be fun. If they need upgrading, the upgrading should involve an understanding of turning them into green spaces. That means turning a lot of the asphalt and all the non green things into green spaces,
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
become cooler. Children become more informed about the plants. It can be used as outdoor classroom. Outdoor classroom means they can actually hold science classes there. They can learn propagation, you know, pollination. They can learn still life
New
painting.
variety
Yeah,
and language.
yeah, and
Yeah.
the reality is a lot of these places are not that. They're just really raw urban spaces.
Yeah.
What he added on to it, which is newer, which I think is a little less used here, he wanted to turn them into renewable energy spaces. That means solar on the roof, rainwater harvesting. I mean, all these are good. I mean, we should do that too. But I feel it's not as urgent here, you know. So they don't the need for that is not quite so high because our school is actually quite well cooled by fans. They're built in the 70s and you know they they they're built with high ceilings. Are you falling asleep?
Yes. I'm sorry. Did I nod off?
Yeah,
So breezy.
yeah. Yeah, so there's that, and then he wants to change how the children are picked up, which is also something we could incorporate here.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to turn them into resilience centers. That means if there is actually a city problem, people could come to the schools. They're actually natural
Part.
destinations,
Right.
which is great, right? The community centers and stuff like that. So that was quite interesting. Okay, so that was my preamble. And I really wanted to set in place that one of the things I wanted to do in school, then still waiting for an opportunity, is actually to utilize this idea of putting a little forested area. And part
Yeah.
of that forested area is
Yeah.
actually this concept of baluka, which is actually a word you taught me,
Right.
right? Which I think is a fantastic concept for this kind of design because it's not the forest.
Yeah.
It's actually the edge of the forest, right? In Malay, they actually use terms like hutan kecil.
Mm.
So it is actually a really an interesting design idea to
Right.
interface urban with a garden or a park or something like that. This idea of a blue cut space.
Yeah.
When I when I first came in, I was doing a lot of work in Iskandar Putri, and
Yeah.
just the travel there, I would see a lot of beluga. Beluga, basically, because they cut a lot of palm oil land, and what you're seeing is a lot of ice import trees, dominated with ice import trees, and then the straight rhododendron,
Yeah.
and then the fork fern. Literally, those three things would be almost like key, and they would be quite pretty. You know, my idea was if I was going to design into it, I would actually make it prettier, which is kind of tied into what is happening in garden design in
Right.
Europe and the US, which is they're really more interested in prairies and meadows, which are actually wilder spaces. Whereas our gardens, our public landscapes are actually still 19th century Victorian gardens. They are strolling gardens. They're for you to see when you're in your buggy and see, and they keep changing out the animals every 6 months. You know,
Yeah. 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 No, I
yeah,
think um it's the problem with Malaysian across the board, yeah. Even at Putrajaya level, it's that they hire good consultants who design gardens really well, and then they don't train the people who are maintaining it, and then everything that's different or unrecognizable is weeded out, and the animals are not cared for as
yeah,
the animals just become treated like a plant, water it and put some fertilizer and go, and there's no unique
yeah,
individual specific
yeah. Although I
uh
have to say,
treatments that you do.
I've yet to see any project which actually did this. It's always an edible garden sometimes.
Yeah.
In KL, they just spend more money on them. They just become fancier and fancier and fancier. And the
Yeah.
landscape architect involved is actually putting more and more built structures in there.
Yeah. Yeah, because they
So
just control the amount of maintenance they have to do, and that's the problem. When
no,
maintenance,
no, that's not the issue. The issue is they actually don't know anything about green spaces. You know, the need
that's why
for
they fall,
forested spaces, natural spaces. It's just
yeah.
it's a knowledge gap.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
don't see it. They
Yeah.
immediately want to go into some kind of edible growing, or if it's a bigger project like Tugu, it's really about just developing a
Contractors
forest.
coming in and putting up a checklist of plans.
Yeah, and it's a forest, or it's a real forest.
Yeah.
But there's no real innovation in building these kind of hybrid planting schemes that are a little bit forest, a little bit urban, and so that you can enjoy those two things, you know, which is much more visible so in an old school city like New York, there would be woodlandy parks, you know. What was newer is maybe to have flowering meadows. That
Right.
one maybe only like Chicago's Lurie Garden or New York City's Highline, that would
Right.
hire the. So, but Bukit Gasing was a nice wilder park, right? When I went with you.
Yeah, I mean that's a natural stream area. So that's
Yeah,
not the only thing they did with that place was add walkways and stepping
sure.
stones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it.
And it was sort of naturally quite light. It was like a heavy forest, so you didn't feel, really, because that's another problem I find when they actually do leave it as forest. It's kind of they're
So then,
frightening. They're
yeah,
too dense. Yeah. Yeah. So,
yeah, because I mean it's called the rainforest because when rain falls on the leaves and the trees, they trap
mm,
all that cubic meter of water right into the roots right below
right.
below them. So therefore, that sponge of the tree as a system, right?
Okay. Actually, let me talk about that a little bit because that was part of the idea for Zoran Mamdani turning these schools into green spaces. Because of capturing water runoff, okay, becoming climate control areas, because they become cooler, they hold the ground a bit more, they capture rain, they reduce flooding. So those would be some of the benefits if we actually did this kind of planting or design.
Yeah.
So, so hey, We'll just wait and see. So, I'm going to be doing it with this private thing when we
Mm.
do our Stipola thing in Kota Jail. That's what asked. I've asked to do a Peluca space. You know, I've
Mm.
asked to do a pocket wild park, and let's see. You know,
How is it different, the Poco Wild Park and the Beluga space?
and the what?
What's the difference between the Pocket Wild Park and the Beluga space?
Okay, Beluca has a certain combination of plants, and there's also a certain usage, you know. Uh, and I'm really thinking, I'm sort of extrapolating how Beluca may have been used, like in a kampong. You know, it's actually on the
Right.
edge of the Bhutans, and you
Yeah.
would probably, it's a combination of management and leaving it alone. So it maybe there's trees that you can get some ulam from. Maybe they'll plant in some bananas and lemongrass at the edge, you
Mm.
know, but it's not a formal planted agricultural plot, you know. And maybe
Yeah,
you
it's
would
probably
plant
kind
more
of a
things.
quality of a no man's land. Probably doesn't
Yeah,
belong to
yeah,
anyone.
it's an intermediate space, which I love the idea of because it's this transition space, you know, to something greener. Uh, I mean, the other thing I want to plant that, which actually we don't see so much in planting, is we have a lot of like ginger family plants, and they're tall, so they could go into the back of the border, and they yield edible flowers, edible leaves that you can wrap food in for grilling.
Yeah.
You can dry them and make tea with it. So there's actually a great opportunity for that. Um, And then you know, well, some of the classic things like ice simple. You know, actually, a lot of kids don't know you can use ice simple for flake.
Yeah.
You know, so it's actually just teaching them about how the utility of nature. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and then with even with like co- commercial people, you know, they want to decorate with rosemary and uh, blood sorrel because we grow in Cameron Highlands when with so many things here, you know, which just
Yeah.
requires some imagination and application.
Or
So
just being familiar enough that you could use a kado to do something quite simple, but maybe it looks boring. So it needs to be cut in a particular way. So I don't
well,
know. That
Kado is
requires some.
changing. Kado is changing. For example, some clients buy Kado from me, but you know why? It's because the Thai use it. They see it in Thai restaurants. You make the Kado little
Yeah.
parcel with a peanut in the thing.
Yeah.
So that's how it's now.
Menkiam,
And
menkiam.
sorry,
It's called menkiam.
is it? Oh, okay.
Mm.
But Kado is actually native to Malaysia. You know, it's actually like old school Peranakans use it as a herb. We had an old Peranakan guy buy our Kado because he made a particular curry with it. It's like
Oh,
cut really
interesting.
fine and it's used as a flavorant. Yeah. So I mean, we have all this territory
Yeah.
to use. You know, so so yeah. I mean, so just to get back to your thing, so the Beluga would be these a slightly different assortment of plants that could be used for outdoor classroom uses. So I would also grow some wild foliage plants that we would use for arts and craft practice. You know, like the fork fern is great for tracing
Mm.
that kind of thing. You know, and we
Yeah,
also I
gamal is good for making all the what's that? The you can shave the bark and you can like make it into like a
right.
stamp and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, the Kebun Kota was a little bit of a Beluga planting. I just mixed things in, which could be used for smell, could be used for,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So, so that's what the blue card. The wild is actually more of an aesthetic idea because people are so used to super manicured parks where everything is just a lawn with maybe
Yeah.
some planting beds and trees planted in very orderly fashion space. Whereas a small pocket wild park, they're grown slightly differently. They're grown in wilder combinations.
Mm.
I would put more grasses, so there would be more pathways going through fully planted spaces as opposed to pathways going through grass.
Yeah.
You know. So that part.
Yeah. So when I did some work in Belum, right, we had like a campsite for fly fishing, and it was one of the further campsites where the local indigenous community collaborated with the National Energy Board to put this site together. And what we realized is because it's so deep in the jungle, and mind you, when I say deep in the jungle, means sometimes we can hear tigers roar from the
Ooh,
campsite.
really?
Not a
Okay,
great
that's something I've never
feeling.
experienced.
Not a great feeling because it's scary, right?
Uh,
So I was there once and we heard the tiger roar quite far away, but the guide was
Wow.
saying that, that means the deers are nearby.
I remember when we did the kuching thing and we went to that park. That was the first time I'd heard an orangutan cry out, like
Okay.
really, and it was quite moving,
Yes.
You've never
Because
heard
you have
it
to
before.
understand their voice is meant to vibrate through the forest and
Yeah,
it's falling.
yeah, yeah.
So when you're standing very close to them,
Sure.
you can feel it in your chest.
Yeah.
It's quite powerful. And I think when we're talking about pathways in the wild, the nature takes back the pathway very quickly, whether through growth or through just the wind pushing the sand over or leaves just falling all over it.
Yeah.
And I think these
Okay,
are
well,
things that,
that is
yeah,
resolved by design. You can design into those solutions because that's how they are designing into the meadows and the prairies and
yeah.
you say,
No, so
yeah,
what I was going to say is appreciating that these things wither, these things, you know, the ebb and flow of things, and
yeah,
walking in a place where you're stepping on dry leaves and that crunching sound.
sure.
These are, especially for kids, right? Or even adults.
Yeah, yeah, that's
These
great.
things
Yeah, yeah,
that
that's a good point.
are
Yeah,
it's sensory,
yeah,
it's another thing that you didn't expect. Because if it's always clean and always like, pristine, then you miss out on that texture. And that's why
good.
we
Actually,
really
one great one was when we did
yeah,
Heritage Forest. I planted a whole bunch of Beckia frutescens, which is a tropical kind of pine. It's really beautiful. It has these hanging tiny leaves, and it was useful. We actually sold it to a bar in Singapore. But as they grew bigger, and it was nature also takes care of itself. If it's
yeah,
shaded, nothing grows underneath. If there's leaf drop, you will start. There's a buildup of this kind of natural mulch. What we didn't expect was actually the propagation of these trees. So we started to see little trees
you
pop
get
out,
wild leaves, yes.
and we started to be able to do a class, incorporating a class
Yeah,
about the cycle, like a natural cycle, which actually kids
yeah,
it needs to be pointed out to them,
yeah.
because it's not something you actually see in an urban garden situation. We're removing weeds, we're buying things from the nursery.
Yeah,
Not a lot of things are being given the opportunity to actually uh, do a sort of a cycle of growth.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that was kind of interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so there are many things if you let a place be semi-wild, So
yeah.
you can see like things that live within that edge, like it could be
Okay,
ants.
I have a question. When you did
Yeah.
Balom, that indigenous community, what is their environment like? Is it quite swept? It's like a swept
No.
space.
Yes and no. In the kampong, it's a lot more organized because over the decades of outsiders coming in and ministers coming in and all these like VIPs coming in, it set a tone
Uh,
that the village needs to look a certain
do they
way.
grow grass?
They don't go. grass, but grass just grows anyway.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. And then in some places it's just erosion, so it's just red soil, and you can
Okay,
see patches
because
where they
actually that is a native garden, because when I first came back, I was like really researching like what is a native Nusantara garden? There is no culture of growing gardens. People are poor, they got no time for gardens. So you only see gardens in like temples, maybe. You will have like a lotus pond or something like that. You might have a garden in a palace, but your everyday they usually have just something called a sweat yard, you know?
Yeah, but they also have like cosmos. They have those
Okay,
what's that?
yeah,
They have them those Japanese roses. They have
right.
hibiscus. They have a little bit of jasmine here and there, and I think it's quite common for these kind of plants to be around these spaces, because also they use some of them for like their rituals and stuff.
Um,
So some of them may be a bit more wild species that they have just cultivated around their home,
sure.
and then they harvest for rituals and things. So in that sense, the indigenous community has adopted a lot of like urban style perspectives of their
Yeah,
places.
it's sounding not so different from like a kampong, like a small.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
example. The only other village, the deepest village in Royal Balloon, it's like where I'm sitting now, and then you can see that row of
Sure.
cement cylinders. So that would be where the river is, and then on the other side of the river, which the river is probably I don't know 10 to 15 meters wide, there will be elephants, and therefore on that side it's a bit more of a grassland. So that would be like the biggest differentiator, like that grassland with the elephants, or the grassland and the seladang. So you see that from their houses literally. And that's why they are always alert when the elephants are too close, because the elephants could just walk into their homes.
So
So
do they cultivate any part of the forest at all? Do they grow anything like coffee or even
um,
in a small amount?
for the community specifically in Belum, they're not allowed to cultivate within
Oh,
the state park. Yeah, because the park is
oh.
supposed to be industrial space. It's that there's been a lot of discussion about allowing the community to have a parcel to zone areas for them to be able to cultivate food crops. But then there's a conflict with elephants. Most elephants walk through certain areas,
Yeah,
and they also
yeah,
harvest as well.
yeah.
So there is an ongoing conversation about what they can plant within the state park. But on the fringe, a lot of them have been recruited into growing rubber. So rubber is a cash crop,
Mm.
but they're not like the best at keeping the rubber tapped consistently. It's like when they need physical cash, they go tap, and then they go sell the scrap.
Oh,
And then if they don't need cash, then they don't tap. So the
that
tree
seems like a
sometimes
bad idea, right?
it's hard to say, because the government had some kind of a plan, and then they kind of didn't quite follow through on the coaching and the mentoring. So, it's a bit of a failed cause in some cases. But not all indigenous communities are the same. And I would say Bolom is just unique to itself and has its own limitations and opportunities. Yeah, because they're more of a fishing community, really.
Would they grow things like tapioca or anything like that?
Mhm. So they'll be around their village,
Sure.
immediately around them. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't be
So that's
far.
like a
So if you
to
think of
me
it
that's
from a
like a
permaculture point
beluga
of
kind of a plant. It's mixed in with the
yeah, it
wild.
will be like in a zone 3.
Yeah.
It's like close enough to the house, but not
Sure.
immediately at the house. Yeah.
Yeah. In
Mm.
fact, if you go to like a farmer's market here, and this is deteriorating actually, when I first started going to the farmer's market here in JB, there were three stalls that sold this. And I would always ask them, where does this come from? And they say, oh, it's just kampong folk collecting it. So
Ah,
it's things, so it's things like the fern, the edible fern.
Fuchabaku.
Yes, things like that, and all these edible leaves and unusual things. I think now there's only like one guy left. Um, but it's a shame because it really is sort of wild food. You know
Yeah.
that. and which is sort of just randomly harvested, you know. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot of foods or plants that we've forgotten how to eat because we're so urban already.
sure, that's another thing.
Like I have a
Yeah,
bunch of Cambodian kids, young people here, and I just told them to like weed a plot of garden bed, and they're like, "Oh, I can harvest this and bringing this back as a salad." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, go for it." So you don't expect them to be eating some of these things, but like, yeah, to them it's not a weed. It is a herb that they can put in a salad.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
actually, that is
Vanessa did that.
something that is actually a part of our module for teaching adults because I've developed that through working with clients, with bars and stuff. Because when they come for a visit or a tour, we just walk them around and get them to taste things, you know, and
And I think the other
slowly.
thing about this is about vocabulary. They can taste things, but they don't know how to describe it. They can taste things and they don't know how to pair it. So that could be the literacy that we want to cultivate.
I think the average person is like that, but not my clients, not people who are actually actively involved in food because they're actually quite, they got very good palates.
Mm. But like for
And
the
it's quite
plants,
fascinating.
right?
The words that they're using to describe the flavors, you know, and then you can see they're trying to figure out how can I use this in my menu, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we have things like cranberry hibiscus, which is, people buy it for a couple of reasons. One is the young leaf actually looks like a maple leaf.
Okay.
So it's very popular with, say, Japanese style restaurants because it looks like a maple leaf, but it grows in the tropics. But it also has this nice tart flavor. That's why it's called cranberry hibiscus. So it's really
Right.
nice in a salad, you know? So,
Right. So these are the red ones, right?
yes, yes. And then, a lot of people have never tried an ulam raja flower. I mean, even if they know the ulam raja,
They
they've
may not have
never,
eaten the flower.
never eaten the flower.
Right.
So there is definitely a whole learning curve to improve this knowledge gap about what is available easily here,
Oh.
And then, that is before we even start talking about drying it and making a tea with it or making a syrup with it, stuff like that.
Right.
So why are you so tired? What's going on? What have you been up to?
Nothing. It's just I think the breeze is really nice. It's just really relaxing. Like your voice is like so like okay, so calming. It's like but yeah, I'm just thinking like there's nothing much in our garden that's edible. Okay, we've got lime flowers and lime trees. We've got 4 types of limes going around. We've got the small one, we've got the kasturi and the what's that? Purot, and then we've got lemon trees.
Do you have what they call limanipis,
Yes.
which is key lime actually?
Yes. So we've got the 4 types of limes here.
Okay.
Um yeah, they don't grow very big. I think the lemon's the largest, like it's a proper tree. But the
Is
rest
it like an Australian lemon? Quite a big yellow lemon?
yeah, no, they're about this big. They're a little bit greenish. It takes a while to get them yellow. I've not seen a yellow one yet, but I know they turn yellow at some point.
I have one of my neighbors gave me some lemons from her brother's garden in Moore, and that's like a native one, and it's a bit longer. It's a little bit more
No, it
cylindrical.
has a pointy butt. It has a really pointy butt.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it is
Again,
the long.
again, this is just another area of just a diversity just in citrus
Yeah.
is really interesting.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have clients that buy syrup from me, which involves calamansi limes. Um, Unfortunately, I worked with a small citrus grower who grew it organically, and he kind of just couldn't keep up. And when I was buying it from him, I was slicing and drying it, and I was getting cafes to buy it as decoration, and sometimes bars would buy it for decoration. We sometimes sell the juice, you know, just the juice because it's actually quite cheap. to buy even organic ones. It's quite cheap. It's crazy that we don't use more of this, you know.
Exactly.
And then there's actually a really tiny. It's called a lime berry.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
You know
You
what
can
that is?
make. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so my neighbor is like an old school. She makes jams and stuff like that. She makes a
Yeah.
jam with it.
They
She
kind of
makes a
like
jam.
the mistletoe plant, right? They have a
A little bit like a
piece
small missile. Yeah,
and
yeah,
a pointy thorn on it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like those ones. So we used to have them in our house in TTDI, and the monkeys would come and pluck them. So they'll sit under the tree and they'll start plucking them out. It's
Mm.
really cute. Yeah, yeah. We used to have
And
that.
then the flowers are valuable. You can make teas with
Really?
it. Yeah, they smell like jasmine. The citrus flowers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but you need the flowers to get the fruit, though.
not if you have enough trees, you can do both.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
So what kind of
actually,
stuff are you gonna plant at the Kota Jail site?
in the Beluga, I want to do this Beluga mix, which is some of those plants are for arts and craft. Some of those plants are like traditional, what you would grow in a, like in a kampong, and maybe you would use them because as you stop seeing it, you actually, for example, I actually had a class in Edible Park where this Malay lady was just teaching how to cook with leaves.
Oh,
We just stopped doing it,
ulam, like nasi ulam.
No, just like wrapping it, you know,
Oh,
baking with it. You make the quail. There was just a lot of things that you can do with leaves.
right.
And as you move into bigger leaves like um, galangal leaves or stuff like that,
Mm.
you actually have more, to, to do with it.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like there's some where you just use the leaf as it is. Like some you need to like temper with heat, right? You need to burn it a little bit so that it doesn't rip. And then you've got like the coconut leaves where you dry and then you
Leave
weave
it.
with it. Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
like just different ways of using the leaf itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I
that
keep
that
I keep
like
trying to get chefs to use things like the ginger leaves. The ginger family has all kinds of different flowers and all kinds of different leaves, some of them quite large, as an alternative to banana leaves. Otherwise, everything is very commoditized here, you
yeah,
know. So it's just a nice, it's looks great on a plate. It
yeah.
even has a smell, it has a nice
I mean the
smell.
plate could change. The plate could be like a little boat, you know, like
Yeah,
long instead of
yeah,
round. So then
yeah.
that changes
Or you
the
just
kind of
put
leaf.
two or three of them, put two or three of them
Yeah,
together and
true.
you've got a,
Yeah.
or you can line a glass with it.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
It's really
I guess you need to have
it's a
access to
creativity.
the yeah, you need to have access to the leaf and
Yeah,
then you need to like think of ways to use it within whatever other materials that you have and then you see
yeah,
innovation. Because if you're not
yeah.
playing with it, and you're just trying to think about it, it's not the same as physically doing
Sure.
something. So that's something that's very interesting to do.
Yeah,
Like it's one of those creativity challenges, right? Like 10 ways of using something.
sure.
Yeah. Cool.
But in Western time spaces, there is somebody actively R&Ding.
Mm.
Even Singapore, when I worked with the bar in Singapore, they actually had a small team of like two people. One of them is actually some kind of sciencey person that understands botanical stuff,
Mm.
and then another one who is uh, more the chef creative part.
Right.
And he understands flavor, he understands smell, things like that.
Right.
We also see I see a lot of bar people from around Southeast Asia. So I just saw somebody from Taiwan. They all access different kinds of plants as well. You know, so that's another thing because a lot of times, even if they're not native here, they couldn't grow here because they're semi-tropical.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Or they cannot deal with the amount of water in one go without that dehydrating element.
They are probably more likely to be able to deal with the water than, say, rosemary or sage or whatever, which is much more popular here. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of these sort of semi-tropical, even if they're mountainous type tropical, are much more suited to growing here than
Right.
rosemary and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So in this beluga space, what kind of like ground cover, or is it because there are plants and bushes you won't have like ground cover?
We generally use, and it's part of our kind of a learning environment. We use mulch that we buy from the city.
Okay.
So
And
it's
that
actually,
feeds soil.
and it's a zero waste. It doesn't really feed. It feeds after a very long time because it contains too much lignin. It's got a lot of wood.
Right.
What it is the city goes down and trims all the trees. And they have these huge lorries, which are actually, what do they call them? Wood mulches or wood whatever.
Right.
They
Okay.
feed them
Yeah.
in, and then it comes out as this mulch, and we buy it from them. You know, I just so happen to have a ex gardener that works for one of these companies,
Oh, nice.
and he's always checking in. Do you want to buy it? And I buy it. It's 3 tons, 200 ringgit, and it lasts 6 months. And we put a nice thick mulch. It actually is good for weed control. It's
Yeah.
good for water retention,
Yeah.
and it will release some nutrients over time.
Yeah.
So we do it like twice a year. You know, so
So do you feel it's better to not like because a lot of people talk about when you put mulch, the mulch thickness, right? It makes a difference, right? So do you feel like there's a thickness that you like that you prefer to maintain?
yeah,
Okay.
it's only because it's to do with weeds. It needs to be 3 inches. Whatever mulch, whether you're using gravel or wood chip or whatever, it needs to be 3 inches so the seeds that fly into it, they just struggle to reach the soil.
Ah, makes sense.
And by the time they do, you can quite easily remove them. You know,
Right, right, right,
a lot
right.
of the times the mulch is too shallow and the seeds root, and you might as well not have had that mulch because it was just
Yeah.
too thin. But it's pretty. It looks pretty. If you really want it to work, it needs to be sort of 3 inches deep. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I guess it also gives you some kind of bordering if you want, you know?
Well, it actually, from an aesthetics point of view, it actually makes the bed look cleaner because it's dark. Whereas
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
just leave the soil, it just looks dirty, you know, because you also
Yeah,
have
I mean
like,
there's no differentiator from the ground.
no, you see the ground and the ground looks very, very messy. You see like rocks and stones and red clay and bits of bark. Whereas when you have a nice thick mulch, it just becomes quite black
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful aesthetic. So it's actually part of my design aesthetic.
Interesting. But it's fully cured mulch lah.
It's not cured because we buy it when they literally just cut it because we actually want it to break down very slowly.
Yeah.
So you only
So
worry
it's
about,
very raw when you put it down.
yeah, it's steaming. You can smell the wood. But that's what's great about it because it's going to last longer because lignin in wood just doesn't break down very easily. You know, I think you need a nap quite badly.
I'm so sorry. Because I'm listening to you and I'm going like, but if we did what we did, like you're talking about mulching here, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the whole because the wind is too strong. It just blows everything
Okay, so
away.
it's actually part of the design. You actually need to make the edges deep enough.
So it's like it goes in.
It goes in, or you can even put a rim of some kind to fold it
So
even
it's like a
tighter.
donut really.
Huh?
It's like a donut around the plant, but and it
No,
goes
no,
in.
no. You build a whole bed. So you actually just circle the bed.
Oh, so just the whole bed.
Yeah.
Ours cannot because we have areas where we have a guild of like bushes, like and two trees, like a big one, and then there's a lower bush, and then there's a smaller tree. But the thing is, with the smaller trees, I feel like some of them are the scale doesn't work. If we made a big bed, then we'll be making a bed
No, no,
a
it
bed
doesn't have
that's
to be a big bed. It just needs to be a deeper bed at the edge. It just needs to hold them out, you know?
okay.
Yeah. And it really doesn't flow away because, we're quite humid here. So if it's deep enough and it's kind of wet enough, it just stays at this sort of dark, rich level,
Right.
you know?
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't dry out and
Yeah.
become fly away. Yeah.
So what's behind me here is like erosion, right? And we
Huh.
have a plan in August to cut and install gabion blocks, which is those cages with rocks.
Yeah.
And once we do that, I don't know how the sand will hold, even if we backfill. But I'm also thinking, how do we plant that with some trees? Because we used to have 170 coconut trees along this stretch, and coconut trees are just like they're like a clump of roots. There's no deep tap roots. So I don't know how we're gonna reinstall the coconut trees once we put the gabions up.
I mean, there's a lot of plants that are intermediate plants, like scabiola
Okay.
is one. Uh, there's actually things like beach morning glory,
Yeah. We have a patch of that
So
somewhere here.
if you've actually got a bit of a structure, it would be fantastic to grow that. It will hold the sand. It will cover the ugly thing.
Yeah.
There's a few plants that are actually coastal plants that work very well that can be utilized.
I guess we'll figure out what it is once it starts stabilizing, because I
Yeah.
think like the beach morning glory is probably the easiest to grow, because that just needs sand. So yeah, but like the coconut trees are the ones that feels a bit like harder to do, because even if we put in like
Do you have casuarina trees?
we used to have casuarina trees, we don't anymore.
Because casuarina trees are quite interesting because they're very easy to get and propagate. But that's the good thing about them. But the bad thing about them is nothing else like to grow with them.
Yes, very true.
But you can use them to bank an area, and you won't have to weed or take care of the space. You just becomes filled with their debris, which is
Yeah.
quite good. You know,
Yeah, true.
if it's a buffer area.
I have a small patch of casuarina trees in the back. It's kind of nice. You just have to plant it with a bit of a distance, because if not, when they grow too close together, can't walk through it,
Yeah,
because all their barks are all straight, right? So you
so
need to kind of have like a 2 or 3 foot gap between them, so that in the future, as they mature, you can actually put a small swing, or you can use it instead of it's just being a bank of trees. Yeah,
so.
yeah. I
So
don't
what are
know.
you up to this week?
This week I got to go back to KL on the 29th. I have a dinner.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then my friend Elaine's putting up a theater with the school that she's working at. So I get to go and see it, the second year of school production.
Oh,
The year before that, I was part of it. We did online uh, poetry exploration with theater kind of practice, but focus on biodiversity. So this year will be, I don't even know what the title is. I think this year is Mamma Mia or something. Last year was a little bit more original. They did something with um um what's that? Midsummer's Night Dream, but with a um so they had like a king and a tiger, and like there's a whole bunch of
wow, you're going back to civilization with culture and
yes.
the arts and stuff.
Yes, so that's going to be on the 1st, and then I'm back here on the 2nd.
Okay.
Days of exit from here. Yeah, I think the last 3 weeks, well, maybe my brother's been away for 4 weeks now. So the last 4 weeks has been me just like, okay, it's just me, so I have to be like on all the time. Then now that he's back, so he came back yesterday. Now I'm a bit more like, Okay, I don't have to worry so much because he's gonna pick up the slack. So it's a relief to have somebody else like share the operations with me. Yeah. So
Right.
maybe that's why I'm doping.
I'm about to move into a little bit of a shift because my gardeners are very close to going to Canada.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah,
thing, a bad thing. Okay.
they got called in for a medical. It may be in the next few months, you know. So we're already starting to, I have one guy, Osman. He's kind of he's super clever. He's already like, if either of them want a day off, they have to deal with their family or whatever. He's got this other guy that comes, and it's like training. We're training him. He will
Right.
take over from that, and he's pretty smart, so it'll be quite good.
That's good. Okay.
And I might even shrink my business here a little, simply because just fruit up and running. I really
Yeah.
don't have to be killing myself here. And then we also will cut back on things like we do a little bit of maintenance work, which is we do when we do private landscaping and we actually maintain it as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a
Yeah.
it's a bit of a problem because we have to organize the time and schedule
Yeah.
that. So if I'm actually thinking that I just may get it down to one worker to take care of the small farm, stop doing the internet work, and just have a little bit of a lighter time.
You've also like specified a lot of your varieties at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a laboratory experiment. It was really a learning thing. I know what to, so that's what we're doing with Desert. We're just scaling it now. We're taking all the intellectual property that's been developed, over the last few years and just scaling, So,
Okay,
okay,
so
I think,
I see you in August, right? So I'm gonna go look at my tickets to see you in August.
yeah, that Merdeka weekend.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was looking at bookings just now and I was going between July and August and I feel like I'll be missing at the beginning of July and I'll be missing at the end of August. So I have that 2 months in between to
Actually,
be quite
another thing that's
yeah.
happening is the rail is going to
Yes.
be a thing in August, and we would make going
Yeah,
to
in Johor side.
Johor to KL.
Ah.
That route will open in August, you know, which means it's a 3.5 to 4.5 hour window, you know. So I'll be able to be going up to KL a little, Otherwise, it's quite complicated, You lose half a day going up there. It's like a 5 hour, 5.5 hour trip. And then you have to get from that bus station to town. Whereas a train, it actually gets you into town. It's
Mm.
from town center to town center. So it might make
Where
trips
does
to,
the train stop in JB?
the main station is called KL Central. You know,
No,
Wong Ah Fuk, the city square.
Johor Bahru.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, that's JB Central. And then it will stop in like Ulai, Segamat, Kluang, something like that.
So this okay, I think I've been to the JB Central because of my trips to Singapore,
Yeah.
right? So you stop there and
Yeah.
then you get on to the other
Yeah,
side.
that's where you get the bus to Singapore. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I think
Okay.
I will look at my dates and I mean I will look at my tickets and I will definitely connect with you about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be talking
What
at
does
some
the week
point.
look like for you?
What's that?
What does the week look like for you?
This week?
Mm.
Well, actually, the quota jail thing is starting to kick in, so I really have to start doing some work for it.
Right.
They want to open at that Merdeka weekend,
Okay.
and so I have to sort of work backwards. It needs like a 45-day to
So
60-day. Yeah.
so what would you do? What do you want to have prepared for that Merdeka Day weekend?
Well, we're still in sort of a discussion phase, and we're at the end of a discussion phase. And it looks as if I sent you that the presentation
Yep.
you took a look at. I've really narrowed it down to three things. One is there is a sort of a landscape art installation,
Yep.
which will be really at the front of the jail. So, and it's small. It's not really a lot of work. And it's called Concrete Scape. So it's about things growing out of the concrete. That's actually part of the story. But it also will provide shade and seating and water for people. So there's actually a utility to that. So that is sort of prioritized. Then now the second priority is actually the completion of the nature play park area. So what was just a playground, we're going to turn into this much more built up nature play park with a lot more landscape elements.
Yep.
And that definitely they're getting a lot more into because they understand that they own a school. They own a Montessori school.
Yeah.
So they also get, oh, wow, this could really be like a transit center.
Yeah.
You know, it's a space for it. We are going to provide some of the talent for the training. They also have teachers. You know what I mean? So it could work out really well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. And then the last thing on the list is actually the pocket park because they uh they want to maybe connect me with this downtown JB Sultan Ibrahim Business Center development thing, who are willing to give them some funding to develop a small park, but it has some strict um exchange. They wanted to have promotional materials for this development. You know,
Right.
so I'm kind of thinking on it, and I'm sort of and then I need to meet them to see how open they are because if they're not open, they'll just want to do what they want to do. It's
Yeah.
billboards
Yeah.
and blah
Yeah.
blah blah. But if they're more open to it, I could actually do a really cool green space with some very high tech things like audio and uh, projection and hologram, like this combination of really green space and tech, which I think is a great fit for them. They want to come across as like this very uh not futuristic, but definitely on a
Tech
modern.
infused. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So it really depends what is that interaction, and then if there's a nice budget, then I'll push for a nice park and maybe more parks, a linear park. I don't know, we'll see.
Right.
Yeah. But definitely the first thing is to get this art installation set up and the school play park, which is the Baluka and a sand pit and a sort of a climbing hill. Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Okay.
Okay. Keep me posted if you need anything.
Okay.
Give me a buzz. Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk to you
See you
soon.
soon.